I think my contention was this. I think that we have created a school system that systemically harms boys.
Hmm. Right, I remember. Okay, yeah, we're talking on Twitter. We're talking
Yeah.
about
I think that a lot of things are child abuse that we don't recognize as being child abuse, specifically against boys.
yeah. Okay, no,
Yeah.
that's a great topic. I actually really like topics where we're kind of expanding the scope of ways that we kind of like think about different things that are a little bit
Yeah.
unintuitive. Like I really like Slavoj Žižek's book about violence that's talking about like objective or subjective violence in institutions. So yeah, I'm interested. I'm open.
Okay. So here's my hot take. Okay. Um, Children play, and children play specifically in different ways, in gendered ways. And play is a really important component of how kids develop into adults, and specifically how they develop into their bodies. Physical play is important. And I think that the fact that we are uh, stopping increasingly young boys, from being able to engage in physical play is abuse.
Hmm.
Is a violence that is being done against boys.
And that's specifically anything that's more like so physical, not just like running or something, but physical like
I think that kids,
like
when
dodgeball
you
or
are a middle
tackling each
school
other,
boy,
something more
yeah,
like contact
tackling each other, yeah,
contact play.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that middle school boys in particular like to tackle each other,
Hmm.
and the fact that increasingly that is being made to be against the rules is a violence against those boys.
Okay, so is there is there something specific that you looked at that kind of sparked this? Was there a particular anecdote or
It's
study
a
or
principle.
sorry?
It's a principle.
No, but I mean, like in terms of like what what gave you this window into how things are now, that's like increasing versus how they were in the past. That
Well, I think that
first kind of
increasingly, uh, more and more physical play is being made to be against the rules in school environments. That's an intuition push, but I think that it's
that's an
probably accurate.
intuition that I have as well. I don't know if I could
Yeah.
substantiate that, but I have that same intuition. I mean, I have for instance just that like it feels like playgrounds are getting worse.
Yeah.
Because when I was a kid, we had these like, okay, very probably like splinter filled, but like very cool wooden,
Sure.
like kind of fantastic. Like it's kind of has like crenellations, looks like a castle, has all this cool,
Yeah.
crazy stuff. And now we have like, I don't know, like a thing that spins or,
Mhm. Right.
um,
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that I think that when we think about the way that our schools environments are increasingly being designed, is that gym equipment is definitely an example of this, but just more generally, uh, I think that adult women do a really poor job and don't even particularly try all that hard to understand the differences between boys play and boys fighting.
mm,
And I think that
mhm.
that is a distinction that has to be parsed, that you have a moral obligation to parse as an educator. And I think that adult women, are much more focused on the differences between female play and female harm, and are not taking seriously those distinctions among boy harm and boy play.
Interesting. So when you think about like changes in how how teachers are kind of like guiding students during like a free play period maybe or during I guess this could be during like a recess or during like a PE or like a gym class.
Hmm.
This could be relevant to either. Um,
Hmm.
do you think there's like more influence of like women educators, or do you think this is something that like men, male educators are going for as well?
I think that uh, male educators can make mistakes also, but I think that it is as a category women educators who are responsible for most of the harm in this case.
Hmm. And but do you think their like influence has relatively increased over the kind of calls that would
I think that I
decide?
don't think that the proportion of educators who are women is increasing, but I think that the proportion of the power over education
Hmm.
that is not just controlled by women, but wielded on behalf of girls is
Mm.
increasing.
Interesting. So there might be a thought that doing things to decrease the amount of kind of physical contact play might make
Mhm.
things safer for girls.
Yeah, which is short-sighted and stupid. I disagree
I
with it. I
I see
think
what
that,
you're saying.
like,
Yeah.
the long-term implications for girls, and
Hmm.
particularly for women, for young women, um, is incredibly damaging if you take away the ability of boys when they are still in middle school to understand their bodies and the differences that their bodies are going through. Um, I Yeah, anyone who has been around a man who doesn't understand his body once he's gotten past puberty becomes hyper aware of it very quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that we are making our young boys unable, because we are making it against the rules for them to learn how their bodies work. And the implication of that is going to be massively damaging for those boys as they become men and for the women around them.
Yeah, I mean, I can say anecdotally, I've done a lot of martial arts throughout my life, like in terms
Yeah.
of, different arts, and just going to, in my university, I went to like a bunch of different clubs, and it's like you can tell when somebody is, kind of showing up new to something, and
Mhm.
they are putting a lot of like energy and effort into what they're doing, but
Yeah.
they aren't very coordinated, and it's generally not fun to work with them. Um, but I think there was a contention that you had even beyond. So um, for me, I'm like bought in 100% that it's like, okay, you can tell when somebody hasn't had that kind of exposure earlier in life by
Sure.
trying to do some like basic martial arts activity with them. Either they haven't
Mhm.
had that like physical experience, or they have a kind of attitude that is that leads them to being, seeing things as more kind of intense and less as play, which could stem from the same thing. um, I think you had a contention that was a little bit beyond that. It's like, not only will they be uncoordinated and not be able to kind of like manipulate their bodies effectively in
No, they'll
space,
be sexually abusive.
but that they'll be sexually abusive. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. You don't like, every single child is born completely unconcerned by anyone else's bodies around them.
Mm, sure.
Their only focus is themselves, right? The way
or
that
they,
you
or, or they
teach,
don't even know that themselves
or
is
they don't
like
even
a.
understand that there is other people. Yeah,
Yeah.
they don't understand.
Yeah.
The way that you teach children to care about other people's uh, mental and physical well-being is through education. It
Mhm.
requires teaching them. You can't expect them to just know it
Or
from birth.
experience even more than teaching. It's like,
Right, exactly
they
right.
push their
And
friend down, their
so,
friend starts crying, and they're like,
yeah,
well, now I feel bad, I hurt my friend, I just pushed him,
yeah,
but now he's hurt, it doesn't make sense. And then at some point, they push you and you fall and you
yeah.
start crying, and you're like,
And so I
wow, they
think that,
pushed
yeah,
me and that hurt.
kids need to be able to get, particularly boys, need to be able to get scuffed up. They need to be able to have physical play.
Hmm.
That needs to be allowed.
Yeah.
And when it's not allowed, it is an abuse against them.
Can you talk a little bit more about that, like further point? So I'm with you absolutely in terms of like, there's absolutely consequences, both like short and long term. Like, I think it's, um, if kids can't like play in that way and can't exhaust themselves in that way, they're not going to be able to focus in the classroom. So it's bad, like even just short term, and then
Mhm.
long term, they won't have that experience. Um, yeah, I think they will probably end up with less kind of like, I guess, what do you call it, like bodily empathy. You could have like kind of
Sure.
feelings empathy. If I say something, I could hurt somebody, but they will have
Mhm.
less body empathy if I, push somebody or
Yeah.
something. I'll hurt them.
Yeah.
um
And I also think that, yeah, and I think that the way that education functions for different people is different, and this isn't true across every single boy or every single girl, obviously. But as a broad point, um, the way that boys learn is a more physical form of education than the way that girls learn,
mm,
which is a more social
mm,
form of learning. Uh, Girls learn because little girls care about the people around them. Boys learn. This is obviously massively oversimplified, but obvious. But with that said, boys learn because they care about the things that are around them, and they care about how stuff works, right? And so the way that we have designed our classrooms is girl centric. The way that we've
mm.
designed our classrooms is around socialism, or not socialism in that sense, but like
So
socializing rather.
yeah.
And so that is a system that is going to benefit women at the cost of men.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even sure I would say that built around socializing. I think if it were built around socializing, that would be better even than what it is now. It's more like lecture, which from my experience works well for very few people at all. Um,
Yeah, but the direction that we're going towards is much more conversation based in classrooms, and it's not based on the kinds of projects
like
that are better
hands on
for,
learning.
yeah.
Yeah.
The
Hmm.
way that boys should be learning history is by making them get into a phalanx, right? I mean that literally, right? They should be like, there's no reason that little kids in middle school can't be getting into phalanxes and playing with pool noodles and like charging at each other in the gymnasium, right? There's no reason for that. That you totally could do that, right? You totally can be doing the kinds of physical, hands on kinds of educational systems that are obviously going to work better for boys and get them to sort of opt in terms of like their emotional engagement. And those are not things that we're focusing on in the trajectory of our education. We're focusing much more on how can we have more conversations, and that's great for those who it works for, but it doesn't work for everyone. And there's an evidence that increasingly, it is massively higher rates of boys who are dropping out. It's massively higher rates of boys who end up with lower grades. Particularly, it's worth pointing out that boys have lower grades in terms of their participation, right?
Mm.
So when you're talking about their grades in terms of test taking or their grades in terms of the SATs actually boys do slightly better than do girls. But in terms of participation, which is to say, does the teacher like you? Turns out that the teachers don't like the boys nearly as much as they like the girls. And that's not shocking given that the overwhelming majority of teachers are themselves women, but it's also really bad and really damaging for those boys.
So I want to push back a little bit, or maybe not even push back, but push back maybe on track for what you said, which is that
Yeah.
um, that boys might be less, for whatever reason. I don't even want to get into, is this like genetic versus very early socialization that lead to these? Is it testosterone versus being given dolls versus Legos? I don't think we need to. I don't even want to get into that. But
Mhm.
you were saying that um, boys maybe get less out of the kind of socializing as a model of learning, um, and teachers are, I guess, whether or not they're women. I mean, I'd be curious what you think if this really is some difference. Do you really think that like women teachers like boys less than man teachers?
Yes. Yes.
Um, I mean, is that
Here's the,
some?
here's the, here's the
Yeah.
equivalent that I will get. If you had a college environment where
Okay.
90% plus of the professors in the college environment were men,
Hmm.
we would all immediately say that's a problem. We would all immediately say that that is representative of something that makes it more difficult. Even if every single one of those male professors is a perfect little angel, just the simple fact that they are overwhelmingly male is a problem in terms of the capacity for girls to succeed in that environment, for student girls to succeed in that environment. So the fact that we're not willing to say that at the level of preschool or at the level of middle school, where obviously gender is more central than in college, because obviously the proportion of education in college that is based on convincing the person to care is a much smaller proportion compared to
Sure.
the actual information that's being provided is more complicated, but the people have already bought in. Whereas the buy-in is like the primary job of a kindergarten teacher or the first grade teacher, right? Any idiot knows the subject matter that a first grade teacher is teaching. It's about trying to convince the kids to care. That's the
Sure.
actual component that they're being paid for.
Yeah.
That their
I mean,
comparative advantages. Yeah.
so I think,
So it matters more is the answer than
yeah.
it does in
So
college, and we care
when we
about it in
look at
college. So why don't we care?
college, when we
Yeah.
look at college and we look at professors, so I would say for that, I've seen probably almost the opposite of like when I see so I did physics, so unsurprisingly, so I was at a relatively small school. The physics class sizes were relatively small, even for the kind of like, you know, standard like major requirements.
Mhm.
And within that, there were relatively few girls. You know, probably unsurprisingly to most people who
Sure.
have. But I felt like it was maybe even slightly the opposite. I did computer science as well, which there actually were a number of women professors, but in physics it was like very biased in terms of like the proportion of professors, the proportions of students. I felt
Sure.
like the male professors went maybe a little bit even kind of above and beyond trying to include female students. The thing I would say is an issue that we look at there is it's like, well, if there's a decent number of, you know, in this case, there weren't a decent number of females. It was like way below parity. But you look at like, oh, there's like, even if it were 50-50 male and female students, but most of the professors are male, then what
Yep.
you're saying is it's like, well, for whatever reason, those women aren't making it into professorships. And so they're either, you know, not opting into or being kind of excluded. And there is
Yeah.
a lot of politics in professorships,
Sure.
from really getting and it's the same thing. So you were talking about the kind of people who influence people. So, you know, there's been, you know, women teaching in grade school for a really long time, but in terms
Sure.
of women as like more, you know, more powerful kind of administrators or principals, I don't know the stats, but I have again kind of a presumption that that's probably increased over time, the proportion of women in kind of more leadership positions within schools. I don't know if you have a
Yeah. I
similar.
think the
Yeah.
broader point though is that like there's an understanding in those classroom environments at the collegiate level that the very fact that we have overwhelmingly male faculty is something to be conscious of as an
Mm-hmm.
overwhelmingly male
Yeah.
faculty.
But we're
There's
missing that
no
consciousness
equivalent.
in the other
There's
direction.
yeah, there's
And
no equivalent
yeah.
where there's a concerted effort at a national or at a localized level to
Mm-hmm.
increase the number of male faculty in K through 12,
Yeah.
and that is a problem. And it is also a problem that we have no serious grappling with the fact that we talk about the school to prison pipeline. We're talking about boys there. We're not
Yeah.
talking about black girls. We're talking about exclusively black boys, right? We're talking about,
Primarily, yeah.
stuff, not primarily, overwhelmingly, like
Overwhelmingly, yeah.
statistically speaking, white boys are more likely to be to leave before they finish 12th grade than are black girls in this
Mm-hmm.
country, right? So like it is not like
Yeah.
and I,
That's
I've said
true.
this before about Black Lives Matter, right? Like we talk about Black Lives Matter. We might as well be like, the reason we call it Black Lives Matter is because we're too cowardly to say what it is, which is Black male lives matter, right? It is not about Black women. It is about boys. It is about men. Um,
Well,
and
I mean, I guess you could say it's both. Maybe the
no,
boy, maybe
it's
the boy
statistically
part
more
is
so
more
about
relevant,
men than it is
but
about Black people. Like
um,
it is the percentage, like the best way of telling is based on money. The second best is based on is based on male or female, and then
mhm.
only after that is it based on race.
Yep,
We are
yeah, yeah,
talking about Black men. We're talking about men. We are not talking about Black people in general. We're talking about men.
sure.
Um,
I don't want to get too much into it. I have
yeah,
some statements I would make, but it's not really the topic. So we,
Got a
yeah,
yeah.
question.
yeah. Go ahead, Void, please.
So Quibbles, would you rather have like segregated classrooms by gender or sex,
Yes,
I should say, maybe
in
Hmm.
middle school.
in middle
Classrooms,
school?
yes. Not for not schools,
Hmm.
but classrooms, yes.
Hmm.
You don't care if that affects their ability to socialize with the opposite sex.
No, they can socialize. They just can't do classes together.
Hmm.
Oh, like at recess or
Yeah, they
lunch or
do recess.
something?
They have lunch together. They have their lockers are together. All of that shit. Um, Free periods, study halls, not free periods, but your study halls are together. All of that stuff. Yeah, they have. They have probably they certainly do their musicals, their theater together. They do probably some sports even together. All of that stuff is together. But in terms of their core classes, and not even necessarily art, that can be done together. Not necessarily music, that can be done together. But if you're talking about English, history, math, science, that should be done separately. Yeah.
And you're
Well, the reason why I
yeah.
bring this up is because apparently I had some teachers cite a study or so that actually showed they do better in class and on their studies if they don't interact with each other between the sexes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But so why specifically middle school then? Why not
I
just
think
all
middle
of it?
school. Yeah, I think middle school is a moment in just in terms of the sort of the um, uh, puberty, right, more than anything, where I think it's really important because this is the moment where uh, hormones start happening and kids start like understanding
Middle
each other
school kids go
sexually,
absolutely nuts.
and kids
Yeah.
start going a little nuts. And so it's like, I think that it's important, if in my perfect world, it would be somewhere between like fifth grade, say, until like ninth grade, say, those classes would be separated. But then after that, they would be together, and prior to that, they would be together.
And for you, so I guess there's two different things at play there. So there's sex segregation for classes that's simply for its own sake, which is that maybe kids learn just better overall if they're sex segregated. But
Mhm.
and but you're talking even primarily about maybe teaching in different ways between those classes. So it might be more
Yeah,
hands-on for male students and more um, social learning for female students.
yeah. Yeah, I think that like math class, like, yeah, science class should have things explode. Things should blow up in science class, right? Math class should
That was my
have
high school.
building stuff, right? You should be building models of stuff, and eventually, as a class project, you should be, making physical things, right? You should be doing those kinds of things, and this matters more for boys. It matters to some degree for girls, but it matters more for boys. And the fact that we don't do it, I think, is rooted in sexism.
Hmm. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, if um, I think it probably would be easier to make the argument. So right now, what we're talking about is a little bit more feels. There's probably some kind of hard data to it
Sure,
already, but we haven't introduced like hard data. But let's
sure.
say some hard data came out that hey, what we're doing in classrooms for for female students is like it was like male centric from the get go, and it's not working well for them.
Mhm.
Probably the capacity to take that and move to a reform. It's I think I agree that that's probably like a shorter on ramp whatever than if like a similar study came out in the reverse. I think I'm with you there that would probably be a harder
Mhm.
sell Um, I mean, when you say it's because of sexism, it's a I don't know. It's a tough, right? Like women have been systematically excluded from schooling in different ways in the past, in ways that
People say
um,
that, I mean, the overwhelming majority of scholarship money goes to women, right? Women are the ones who are the overwhelming majority of students who go to college in the first place. They're even more of a
well now,
majority of
yeah,
people now.
yeah,
Even more of a majority of the people who graduate college. They have better grades throughout, even though they don't have better SAT scores.
mm-hmm.
Their grades specifically in terms of the component that is based on just personal opinions of professors at every single grade level is benefits to women over boys, or girls over boys. We talk about the disparities in terms of all of these different things. Women, there are more PhD women than there are PhD men at this point. All of these different things, you go higher, higher, and higher. Whether you're talking all the way from kindergarten to the highest level, it turns out that women are benefited.
Oh, and you're talking about like now year by year, or like total. I think, oh, I
Um,
see by like 2031 and 32. Or wait,
yeah,
no,
the
wait, what is
trajectory.
this? Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
so in
I'm
2020,
currently wrong.
2021, there are
Yeah,
85,000 male, 109,000 female. So
yeah,
Dr.
yeah,
Drew, yeah, mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, like the stats on this are pretty clear,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if we were to see this level of disparity on racial grounds, we would make a claim.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird that we're not willing to make the same claim.
Or the other way in sex grounds.
Right. And it's
Yeah.
weird that we're not willing to make this claim in terms of sex grounds when
Mm-hmm.
the data is overwhelmingly obvious.
So okay, so two questions. So one is, um, what exactly does it buy us, or or in what ways could you reinforce that this is based on sexism? And the other question is, are there other ways to kind of like strongly argue that this is an issue without necessarily relying on that?
I think
Just
that it's
curious.
important to call it sexism because I think
Mm.
that it is sexism. And I think that it's useful to name it thusly because I think that part of the problem that we have in terms of the way that we understand boys and the ways that boys are being harmed by society is that we're struggling clearly to grapple with the ways that society is screwing over boys as boys.
Mm-hmm.
People talk about like race and gender as though they're sort of indistinguishable as categories, as types of categories. They just aren't. Like I have never once in my life, I've certainly experienced depression as a result of being Jewish, but never.
Oh,
Oh no, he
sorry.
cut out.
Oh no.
As
We just lost the last like 10 seconds of what you were saying. It's
are
still
you frozen?
no.
Okay.
We got a black
I've never
screen now.
once.
Oh, you're back.
You're
Am I
yeah,
back? You can hear me?
yeah. You're back.
Yeah, I've never once in my life experienced any degree of oppression, even minute oppression, as a result of looking white. I have absolutely experienced oppression difficulties as a result of looking male.
Mm.
And I think that the problem is that we are sort of living in this cuckoo land where we're not able to admit when things are obviously sexist against boys and against men, even though they clearly are. And that's why we end up having to call things like Black Lives Matter, even though obviously, of course, this is a problem of boys. This is a problem of men. This is not even primarily a problem of race. It is primarily a matter of sex. And it's weird that we're not able to admit that. It's weird that when we talk about, mass incarceration, we're not willing to admit that this is a man problem. It's
Okay,
weird.
can I say something here? Like, I think you're right. Like, yes, there is sexism towards men, but I think you should also just be able to admit, like, culturally, it kind of seems like men are just supposed to take it on the nose. Like,
Yeah.
you may as well have like a woman come up to you, slap you in the face, call you a sexist for sexist reasons, and then somebody later on your bro tells you to just man up and take it.
Sure.
Like, rub some dirt on it, dude. Pour some salt into that wound a little bit more.
Right, but another component of it is that we are increasingly, our societal response to problems is a very feminine response. Our response to problems is, let's talk about the problems, blah, 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 right? Which is like, fine. Like that's a perfectly valid way of going about things. But it is only one way of going about things. And the therapy speak that is expected around every single conversation, the expectation that we're talking about these things in terms of like, collective trauma and all of that kind of shit is like, no, actually go fuck yourself. Like this is a dumb way of talking about things. We need to talk about things in the way that is the sort of natural language of boys rather than the natural language of girls.
Wait, so yes, so I'm curious. So my mom's a therapist. So I grew up being very fluent in
in therapy speak,
yeah.
in women's language, yeah.
In the language of the women's, right?
Yeah.
What does man speak for? These systems aren't really accommodating us well. Is it ooga booga?
No, it's fuck this
shoving
shit.
something. Yeah, fuck this shit. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, but like actually, like the fact that we're not able to curse in classrooms, for example, it's crazy. It's crazy that you're not, for example, able to, there's lots of stuff that ought to be acceptable in a classroom that is not acceptable in a classroom. Why
Should
can't
I be able to say the N-word in the classroom?
Okay, let's.
Exactly.
What's wrong with me going like this and just pacing as we're having this conversation? There's no, this has no effect whatsoever on your ability to understand what I'm saying or my ability to say it, right? So why is this not the expectation? Why can't I just be like wandering around the classroom like this, also doodling, also, I don't know, playing with my headphones or whatever? Why can't I currently have clay in my hand? Why can't I currently be, what I'm saying? Like all of this is
Your
like,
network even seems
it's
better.
dumb. And it matters less. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have ADHD, and for me, like sitting still in the classroom, not doing anything, it was very tough. It was, you could call it torture even. Yeah. So I'm with you there. I think that's.
But I think it's sexist. It's not just torture. It's sexist torture.
So, okay. So, let me think. If your students are like walking around doing all kinds of things, have more leeway, I think it's understandable to think that it's going to be harder to keep just like basic order in the classroom, so that people can anything can happen that's related to learning. And I guess the counterpoint would be, well, if your students are spending all of their energy trying to keep still and not swear, they're not going to be learning anything, which is maybe a little bit more like me in the classroom.
Yeah. So then don't do that.
Interesting.
Like separate them. Have a classroom with boys where you're in, yes, there's a table in the middle of the room, but they're able to walk around and they're able to be, somewhat, looking around, whatever, but they have some undergirding activity, and the undergirding activity is the thing that's happening, right? And everyone, obviously, no one should be allowed to have their phone, of course, any of that shit, but they should be able to literally give kids clay, literally give them silent activity to do with their hands that requires no brain power, right? Literally just put clay in their hands. Yeah. And I mean that, you know what I'm saying? There's no reason that you shouldn't be doing that. There's no reason that kids need to be sitting in a seat the whole time. There's no reason that any of these things have to happen. That's just a decision that we've made as a society, and it's a dumb one.
I mean that was a decision that was made probably, I don't know, 200-300 years ago or something, right? I mean, that's
a long time.
Yeah.
That's not new. But yeah, all of those are dumb. It's also dumb that why am I not allowed to curse in classrooms? Why?
Okay.
Could be disruptive, I guess.
Well, fuck that. No, seriously, like why?
So-
It's such a stupid thing.
So starting from that, this isn't inherently an argument against it. This is just me trying to think through reasons. So in a professional environment, you can't curse that much.
Yes,
and
you can.
Part of
No, that's not true. You absolutely can curse in a work environment. It's not true.
it depends.
It's true,
depending on
but
the
it wouldn't be
meeting,
considered professional.
How about like any man field? Construction,
if you're
you
in
can absolutely
construction,
curse.
Sure, of course.
Any manual labor, you can curse.
I'm talking about like
There's no problem.
white collar.
Sure. So you're talking specifically about white collar jobs, which are only a subset of jobs that are a disproportionately female type of job, right? That's the kind of job that you're talking about. That's the only type of job that we seem to care about as a society. We're not actually training kids to be good at construction. We're not training kids to be good at any number of any kind of physical labor, which is again overwhelmingly male. We don't care about those boys. And then we also, and on top of that, we only talk about one particular type of white collar jobs. And that one particular type of white collar jobs are the ones that are disproportionately female coded.
It's interesting. Let's see, female coded. So
yeah.
Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Sure. We're focusing on liberal arts. We're not focusing on STEM. We're focusing on liberal arts.
No, I mean
We're focusing on female coded stuff.
So I'm in STEM, and I'm thinking about STEM when I'm thinking about like my own professional activities.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more female coded than a construction site, but I don't know if I would say it's like I don't know if I would say like female versus male coded versus kind of like I don't know, like prim and proper versus rough and callous, something like that. Which I guess you could say is kind of analogous for
proper.
Sorry, you just
prim and proper is just,
oh no.
Yeah, prim and proper. You can hear me again.
Yeah.
I don't know why this keeps on happening.
Back, yeah.
Prim and proper just means female coded. I don't see those as being dissimilar. Yeah, those are the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. Right. So.
Okay. So then it is institutionally sexist.
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm feeling even kind of a resistance to say that, and I think there is like a absolutely a. I mean, okay. So here's where it gets tough. There's absolutely a bias, of course, within more liberal spaces to be more reluctant to acknowledge sexism against boys than against girls. Whether or not there's good reasons for that, I think probably most people would be with me in saying that that's the case, or maybe they'd say, well, that doesn't happen, so it's not a thing. But that's kind of saying the same thing. I think, yeah, it's important to really follow kind of like feminist teachings to their endpoint, which is that it's about patriarchy, and patriarchy hurts girls and boys. Maybe we shouldn't even call it patriarchy. I don't know, whatever system it is that exists. Whatever system it is that exists, that has propped up, men and boys in positions of power over women for a very long time. No? Okay.
I don't think
okay, interesting.
Okay,
we're going deeper.
I don't think it's decided.
Sock it to me.
Okay. When we talk about patriarchal societies, we talk about societies where men are in control, right? Okay. Obama in the recent past was the most powerful man in politics, most powerful person in politics,
sure.
Right? He was black. Did we live in a black-controlled country when the president was black?
Well, of course he was black depending on who you talk to.
The answer is, of course.
Morgan Freeman had some interesting views on that one.
Okay.
I mean,
The answer
so
is, of course, not. Even with a black president, we have a society that is broadly controlled, not by the individual who happens to be at this point of leadership, but by the people who are the rank and file who are able to prop him up into that position. And so the rank and
Sure.
file of our politics is women. The rank and file of our politics is when you talk about people who control the PTA, when you talk about people who go to zoning board administration meetings, when you talk about people who work on and run campaigns, when you talk about people who are staffers, when you talk about people who literally run the debates, which are generally, with the exception of the Commission of Presidential Debates, the overwhelming majority of debates in this country are run by the League of Women Voters, literally called the League of Women Voters, right? When you talk about the way that our politics functions in this country, yes, the figureheads are disproportionately male, but the actual leadership behind them, the actual like aggregate leadership, is aggregate female, and it's not close.
it's interesting. So okay, so I think of that I would probably strip away like PTA because that's not relevant to electing the president. I think I would strip away
It's
more
politics. Hold on.
politics.
It's politics.
You're saying
PTA is
you're
politics.
saying in terms of like political. So there's people in positions of power, and there's people that put people in positions of power. And if you were
Yeah.
to integrate over the sum total amount of power,
Who is it? It's Xi. I think it's Xi Jinping. He said, or not Xi Jinping. What was his name? Mao Zedong. I'm sorry, not Xi Jinping. Mao Zedong said this great a long time ago, which is the people can elect whoever they want, so long as I'm in charge of the primary, basically. So long as I'm in charge of like who are on the ballot in this country. So they're the ones.
Yeah, we're getting like some coming through. I think you're good now. Yeah.
I'm gonna change my phone again. I'm sorry. I'll change my phone.
I wonder if it's Discord.
Yeah,
I did want to say, Quibbles, I think I might actually agree with you on like swearing in the classroom, but I think this kind of hinges on like whether or not you can say you're a part of the archivist camp in politics. Like if we're reading books that have swear words in them, I don't know if it makes much of a difference in the classroom if you're saying it. But at the same time, it seems like there can be scenarios where, yeah, you might be able to teach like kids about sex using porn in an almost academic kind of sense. And that seems like where we're at. Like when we think about where some of these book bans are coming from.
Wait, say that again.
Say what again? Which part?
Say that. Wait, the part about. I was just trying to follow what you're saying. You're making an analogy between swearing in classrooms and books that have swears in them.
Yeah, how much free speech should we have in the classroom? Like, I almost dare say, like, if I should be able to just say the N-word relentlessly in a classroom, that would be a huge distraction if it was done in a, screaming kind of fit.
Of course, that's true. Yeah, there has to be classroom management, obviously. But the point is that the classroom management style has been a style that we've allowed to prevail, which is a style that is designed around the protection of girls and their educational needs, rather than the protection of boys and their educational needs. And I was saying that further, right? It's not just about in terms of what's actually being able to be taught. I think that like we should absolutely have uniforms, for example. The fact that we don't have uniforms in class is insane. We need uniforms. I want to be clear. I mean uniforms, not dress codes. I mean uniforms. We need uniforms in our classrooms.
Would the school be paying for it?
No.
If you're going to force me to buy like my kids' school uniform, I'm just going to say no.
Like, sure, okay, fine. We can make it be paid for by the state. I don't care. This is not a relevant component of the cost of education. The cost of the uniforms would be minuscule comparative to the cost of everything else,
Sure.
right?
So how would you? Okay, so so I grew up in like a pretty liberal area, pretty liberal kind of schools are pretty both liberal in terms of kind of politically, but liberal in terms of the level of kind of casualness. We didn't necessarily have to call every teacher Mr. or Mrs. whoever, or we'd get yelled at or something. It was a relatively relaxed kind of like interaction in our instruction. And for me, something like a required uniform would have felt, pretty constrictive. I don't know
Good.
how much I would have cared, but I probably would have been
There should be
generally
constriction.
against it. Um,
I'm in
so
support of it. There should be constriction.
so is constriction itself, when it doesn't harm other things, inherently beneficial, or is there something about this particular
No, this particular one
constriction?
is really important. I think that like there is a massive component of our educational system that ends up getting fucked because boys are distracted, girls are trying to distract them, which is just an inherent component of what it means to be a growing kid who's trying to find themselves sexually. And that's one component of it. But the other component of it is that like I don't think that it's good when different girls are treated differently on the basis of their different body types. I don't think that that's
Sure.
good, and that is a guarantee when you start allowing for dress codes rather than having uniforms.
Sure.
I think that having the
Dress
same
codes
exact
can
thing
be
for every
very,
single person.
yeah,
Yeah, dress codes are
can be
horrible.
very
Don't do dress.
discriminatory. Yeah.
Uniforms are what you want to do because uniforms are the exact same for every single person there. Every single student should have the exact same
Although, I
uniform.
mean, okay, if you want to get a little bit technical, which we kind of are, so in the ways that dress codes, so the way that the length of a skirt or something that has to be can
Yeah,
can look really different on one person versus another. A uniform could as well, right? I mean, a uniform
sure,
could flatter somebody's body type versus look really really bad on somebody else, right?
sure. You need uniforms.
So okay, so
Like without a uniform, like
yeah,
life is complicated as a middle schooler and as a high schooler. I think uniform should continue through high school, actually.
through high school, okay.
Uh, yeah, it's complicated for everyone, and it's more complicated for certain people, bluntly, people who have gone through sexual trauma. And part of going through sexual trauma is that you have a very specific relationship to your body. And that very specific relationship to your body is something that is constantly a pressure that's on you. And you're constantly, I had a friend in high school who literally came to school every single day, and she would have two different outfits that she brought to school every single day, and then she would decide midday which one she wanted to wear because she was constantly flitting between wanting to look like the sexiest person in the class versus wanting to hide in a sweatshirt and not have anyone notice her. And that's just a reality for both boys and girls. When I was in high school, I was both clinically underweight, number one, but number two, I also was regularly trying to look ugly. Right, I was regularly doing things that I knew would make me look less attractive because I was really over sexualized as a young child. And so, yeah, I think that you should just have uniforms for everyone.
So it would just not be something you would. So
You
okay,
shouldn't. This shouldn't be a thought process. You should just not have uniforms. You should just not be able to allow for
so
kids to be thinking about what they're wearing.
yeah, it wouldn't be something you would think about in terms of like what should I choose, but I mean, people still might think about it in terms of, well, I'm gonna look like this. I mean, would you want that to be? So you mentioned Mao. Would you want like kind of like gray, gray slacks and like for everybody
No, I
like
want them to.
kind of
I want them
communist
to
style. I
look.
mean, I don't hate that style.
I want them
Um,
to look nice. I want them to, fine, wear ties or whatever. I want you to wear a jacket. I don't care what it is, so long as it's the exact same for everyone.
okay, exact same for everyone. So exact same for boys and for girls. It wouldn't be
Yeah.
gendered.
No.
Okay. I mean, I think I probably have fewer issues with that because I mean, yeah, generally, kind of uniforms like for girls are like skirts and stockings and stuff, which in
Yeah.
2023
Oh yeah. I should
is
clarify. It
yeah
needs to be anti-sexual,
anti-sexual.
like actively anti-sexual. Do not have the sexy schoolgirl
Hmm.
fit. That's
Yeah,
not what we're going for.
yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, um, I can see the pros. The cons would be, I mean, school is where you spend, most of your time with your peers.
Yeah.
I think when you're a kid. Um,
Yeah. I think as a policy prescription, I don't want to be designing our policies in order to make little kids sexy.
well, so
I got a cue, unless you want to go.
Yeah, I mean, just to quickly say, I mean, um, I think you may have a particular kind of perspective and experience with this that's not
Sure.
universal, because you know, dressing sexy is not necessarily that can be one aspect, but in the more general aspect, when it comes to, you know, choosing what you're wearing, or your parents choosing what you're wearing, or whatever, which isn't, you know, is necessarily the most fun. But you know, you having some choice in that as a kid, or the school not choosing, is some form of expression. It might be, I like this band, or you know, I like these shoes, or you know, I like these shoes because I like to skate and I want to be a skater.
No,
No,
no, no opposed.
why is why is that something? So you were talking about kids getting experience with,
Yeah,
and specifically, especially boys, at least,
sure.
getting experience with physical activity and getting
Yep,
experience with that young, and then being able to relate better. You know,
sure.
why is the way that we dress not the kind of thing?
Because yeah, I think that you should start to begin those expressions, but I think that those expressions should start later than middle school. If you're talking about in high school, yeah, fine, there should be some dress down days. There should be days where those are
Go casual
permitted,
Friday, kind
or
of.
casual Friday, whatever it is, fine. But that, you know, there should be structure. And I think that we are overly structured in terms of the inability to engage in play, in terms of our physical interactions between kids. But I think that we are understructured in terms of our ability to sexualize ourselves as children. So I think that similarly, I believe this even more strongly than I do the uniform component. I think that it should be against the rules. I think that kids should be disciplined heavily for simply posting anything on Instagram or on TikTok or on Facebook, message, any of the Snapchat, whatever. I think it should be against the rules to be engaged in social media. As a
Like the
consumer, that's fine,
like
maybe. But as a producer, I don't think you should be able to produce content at all.
so as so like the apps at an app level, or at like a school level, like the school should all
The
schools should have a
schools, yeah,
policy, like
the
you'll get in
apps also,
trouble, you get detention or
yeah,
expelled or
yeah,
something.
you should get attention.
You get detention if you post on social media.
Yeah,
um I mean, is that just like, if you're posting like, you know,
anything,
kind of, um
anything. Children should not be the producers of content.
sure, I
Anything.
mean, yeah, I mean, in general, I'm with you that it's probably just extremely harmful for kids overall. At, at a school level, I think, I don't. That feels like a weird place to do it. Um,
Like either schools are about educating children and are about getting them healthy habits and trying to get them to be
mm,
able to be functional members of society, or
mhm.
they're not. If we care about our students, the fact that our students are literally engaging in softcore pornography by the time they're 13 years old is a problem.
Well, wait.
But with softcore porn,
So
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
wait.
Yeah,
Well,
I had a
softcore
well,
cue
just to
pornography.
say,
earlier.
I feel like you've
There are
jumped the.
13, yeah,
I
there are
yeah.
little
Go ahead.
babies. There are little babies who are literally regularly posting bikini pictures in the equivalent of their underwear and are literally regularly dancing around and doing all of these TikTok dances that are clearly designed to be performing a sexual sort of mimicry, right? And all of that is incredibly damaging to their psychology. Obviously, it's damaging to their psychology. We all know it's damaging to their psychology because at this point, most of us grew up doing it ourselves, right? It's horrible. That should not be a part of what it means to be a 13-year-old.
So what you would want as a blanket ban,
Yeah,
is that because you think it would be functionally impossible to moderate what
I
kinds
don't
of
want.
things they're
Yeah, I don't
posting?
want.
You
Yeah,
don't
in the
want a
same way
dress
as the
code.
uniform.
You want a
In the
uniform.
same way,
Uniform is, you can't.
exactly.
Yeah.
In the same way as dress codes don't work because then you end up in the position where teachers are making the decision.
Teachers are
Um,
scrolling through and
you
being
want
like,
a blanket.
I don't know, this is kind of on the
Yeah,
edge.
you need a blanket. You need a
Hmm.
blanket rule. No, you are not allowed to post. That's the rule. No, you are not allowed to wear any of that. This is the one thing that you wear, right? And therefore, I don't have to be about, well, let me take out a measuring tape and check the size of your skirt, a young lady, right? I don't want to be doing that. Just no, that's against the dress code, or excuse me, against the uniform. You are not in uniform. That's it.
Yeah.
Period. That's it. Right? No, you just posted something on Instagram. You can't do that. That's it.
And so when it comes to social media, that would be like presumably like your peers snitching on each other, or like how would that in
Sure.
practice get? Yeah, something like that.
Sure.
Like a student comes to a teacher and says,
Yeah.
"Hey, I saw that this person posted," or like,
It's against the rules. That's it.
Mhm.
It's against the rules.
I don't even know if I hate that. Social media is like really bad for kids. So
It's horrible for children. We all know that it's horrible for children, but we're not willing to do anything about the fact that it's horrible for children. We all know that it's horrible for children. It is if we it is child abuse. The fact that we permit children to have access to pornography as easily as they do, and the fact that we allow them to make softcore pornography is child abuse.
Yeah, I mean, I think it.
Like, we don't just.
I think it probably extends further.
To make it. Yeah.
You're very focused on like the kind of sexual angle of it. I think the kind of like content production mindset itself.
Sure.
Even further.
I mean, I think perhaps it's because I myself had an eating disorder, and because I knew a lot of people who also had eating disorders. It is horrible for children.
It's really damaging. Yeah.
It's horrible. They cannot be permitted to engage in it. It must be against the rules.
Yeah, I don't know. Void, what do you? I think you had like a few questions, and I think
oh boy, yeah, we went through a few things.
Feel free to go back.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
One of the things, just to draw back on some things you said, quibbles, which was like, okay, you said you were basically in favor of like segregating classrooms by sex, like middle school through high school. I'm wondering if they were already like segregated, would it really matter if they had school uniforms? Because they wouldn't really be seeing each other, would they?
So number one, they would be seeing each other even in middle school. I said I think it was fifth, maybe a sixth. I don't remember exactly what I said, but either fifth or sixth grade through ninth grade is what I said. So not all of high school.
But basically middle school, segregated classrooms.
Segregated classrooms, but classrooms is different than than school as a whole, because they would still be doing lunch together, they would still be doing recess together, they would still be in the hallways together, they would still know each other. Certainly, they would still interact on a daily basis with one another. They just wouldn't be in classes together. And I want to be clarify, even that they would probably still be doing art together. They would probably still be doing theater together. All of those things they'd be doing together. They just wouldn't be doing the core English, history, math, science.
So you don't think it's possible that while they're going through puberty, they can't still kind of sexualize each other, even with those recreational activities? Like,
no, they can.
I'm curious to know. Like, I didn't grow up like this. I didn't grow up in a school with uniforms or anything. I did go through a boarding school that had us like tuck in our shirts and stuff, but it wasn't a uniform. It was more like a more strict dress code.
Children can and do sexualize each other. That's just a reality.
So I'm curious to know, like,
that I'm okay.
I'm curious to know if it's possible that if you're still growing up with these uniforms, trying to reduce the sexualization as much as possible on students, is it possible that pretty privilege will still seep through, and they'll still find ways to sexualize each other? That's what I'm wondering right now.
Yeah, I'm not trying to end pretty privilege. Pretty privilege that's fine. I myself am a pretty person, and I want to stay privileged. But like the problem that I see is when we are institutionalizing these things, and I think that the idea of I don't want to see it institutionalized. And so I think that when we don't have a uniform, that is an institutionalization of the sexualization of children. When we allow kids to be on social media, that is an institutionalization of the sexualization of minors. When we allow for when we stop boys from being able to play in gendered boys male ways during recess, that is an institutionalized attack on male learning. Those kinds of things I see as problems.
Okay. Yeah, so the way I imagine you setting this up, it wouldn't be like Japanese style uniforms where women have skirts and stuff. It all be
No,
gender
it would be
neutral.
it would be
Be like
anti
more akin to
it
scrubs
would
or
be
something.
like
it would
communist
be
China
yeah
era,
it would be
like
it would be
it would be Yu Yu
anti-sexual
Hakusho level,
uniform.
like what the
Yeah,
boys are
it'd be
wearing. Yeah,
anti-sexual.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you thought about like kind of digging into the literature and seeing, what kind of studies have been done on this, looking at like different. So there's a lot of study looking at like different, different
I
school
think there's
systems, different
one.
in different countries, and seeing how they've tried out different things and seeing kind of what works. I'm
Yeah.
sure there's got to be, different representations of all of these in different countries, different time periods.
So I won't pretend to have researched this as heavily as I've researched Israel Palestine by any stretch. What I will say is that at a baseline, we should recognize as a country and as a globe, really, that whatever we're doing currently is not working. Uh, in that the stats on the outcomes of children from just 30 years ago comparative to today, suicidality is up, eating disorders are way up, depression is way up. All of these things are way, 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 way up. And so the starting premise needs to be that whatever we're doing currently, it ain't working, right? And that has to be where we start. And so, yeah, what we used to do is we used to have uniforms. What we used to do is we used to have, more of a gender breakdown between how much time boys and girls were spending together. What we used to do is we used to have boys were able to play at recess. What we used to do is blah, 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 all of those things, like the basic, like the basic sort of axiom that I come from in terms of all of this is that what we're doing ain't working, and what we did in the past worked better. And so my presumption is we should get back to what we used to do, broadly speaking, and that it is a positive defense of something beyond that. If you want to permit something else, right? So the presumption is no to phones and social media. The presumption is no to internet in classrooms. The presumption is no to chat GPT or whatever the fuck. The presumption is no to any of porn, any of that nonsense should be permitted in kids' lives.
So I, I think I'm with you to some extent. I do think it's important to research to the extent that's possible those individual factors and figure out what kind of individual importance those have and in what direction. But uh, it's not as these aren't simple switches to just to flick, right. The cat's out of the bag on some of these, at least uniforms. That might be something. I don't know if as a society we're more individualistic than we used to be, so it'd be harder, something like that. But something like social media just didn't exist 100 years ago, and now it takes an active effort to try
Fine.
to put it in the
If
bag.
you care about your
Um,
kids, then you should be willing to do the active effort. Yeah.
mhm.
Like, yeah, being a parent is not supposed to be easy. It's not expected to be easy, and you should have to put in some effort.
Yeah. Well, I
And
mean,
yeah,
being a parent, being a teacher is like well, maximal effort.
sure,
So I think it is critical to understand. You can never know. If we do this thing 100%, it's going to work out, right? You can only study something so much. You can only have like so
sure.
much information about something. But I think it is important to have some backing, something reproducible. Even to try out, um, you know, you know, start trying these out in a school district just to figure out even how to do it. Like
Yeah,
what kind of things do you run into when you try to keep kids from creating social media accounts? Are they 100% better at outsmarting you and they just always do it behind your back, or how do you actually do that practically? But I think
will
I
say
think I don't
that,
fundamentally disagree with a lot of what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I will say that I went to a summer camp, which is admittedly residential, so it's a full-time thing, right? So I went to it for 6 years, and then I was a counselor.
Sorry, can you say that again? I couldn't. You went to.
I was a counselor for 1 year, and I was a camper for 6 years
at a summer camp. Mm-hmm.
At a summer camp, a sleepaway summer camp, for 8 weeks over the summer, and we were not allowed to have phones. We actually lived in bunks that didn't have electricity, and it was great. It's much better to not have phones for that period of time, and it's really important to socialization.
Yeah, I think Void is BRB. Oh.
No, I'm still here.
Oh, you're still here? Okay.
You sent me some Gaza stuff?
Okay.
Sorry, I'm on my phone.
Awesome.
I think I looked at that
Topic
paper.
of the day, practically.
Let me see. I mean, is there anything else on this topic? Void, if you want to talk to Quibbles about stuff with Israel Palestine, that's
sure.
Up to you guys.
It seems like you're very concerned with either the sexualization or what you perceive as like the over sexualization of like students. I don't know if I would say that it should even be in elementary school that any of this stuff should be applied. I think it should be applied if you want to apply it accurately to what you don't want to have happen, which would be around puberty, when the hormones start kicking in. And
I think that when I look at, I think that kids are making social media posts that they shouldn't be making from birth.
From birth?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, I mean, like I see, like I was at my sister's wedding a couple of months ago, and I saw some of my cousins, and I had a cousin, and my now in-law had a cousin, and both of them were like 6-year-old girls, and both of them were on their iPads and were not interacting at all with each other. If that were just 10 years ago, neither one of those kids would have an iPad, and both of those kids would have gotten to know each other and would have hung out and would have been dancing around and being stupid little idiot kids. But they are not being stupid little idiot kids. And the result of that is obviously horrible for both of those 6-year-old girls.
Yeah.
Well, that's not in a school setting, though, right?
No, I know. But the point is that, like, we need to be able to, in terms of public policy, be ensuring that the component of children's lives that we can dictate at a societal level, we should be dictating in the right directions. And the right direction is not for those 6-year-old girls to be sitting there playing on our iPads. The right direction societally is for the 6-year-old girls to be dancing around being idiots together.
Sure, that's your family though. I'm talking about like in school.
No, but the point is, like, you're asking me like whether or not I have a policy prescription in terms of middle school and even earlier than puberty. My answer is yes. I don't want for children to have access to their phones prior to puberty. I don't want for children to be publishing anything on YouTube or anything on Instagram or TikTok or whatever prior to puberty. I think that those little kids are getting sucked into something that is intentionally addictive, number one, and number two, that they are being sucked into something that is very psychologically damaging because it is very, very intensely sexual.
Gotcha. I think that should be left up to the parents, though, for the most part. Like when I don't know, maybe it's just a different generation growing up because I didn't even get like my first cell phone until I was like 12 or 13. And
Parents are dumb. That's stupid.
Yeah, I don't know why you'd be giving your kid a cell phone that early on, but I don't know. Everything is circumstantial, and I'm curious to know, like, does this include also like sex ed?
What do you mean? Does it include sex ed?
Like, you don't want students to be sexualized, but when we talk about like sex ed, like, okay, I was talking vaguely
I don't think
about like banned books. We got like genderqueer that's banned in schools, for example. That's kind of the go-to example.
Say that last part again.
I don't think that teaching kids sex ed is the same thing as giving kids access to porn and encouraging them to make softcore porn.
Okay.
which is what
fair,
you're
but
doing when you let them be on Instagram.
that's
It's what
fair,
you're
but you realize, and I don't know, are you in America, by the way?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, so you know then that conservatives label that kind of book as porn and want to ban it in schools because
No,
they think it goes too far in sex ed.
I want to be crystal clear. I'm labeling TikTok as softcore pornography. I'm labeling Instagram as softcore pornography, and I'm naming Pornhub as hardcore pornography. That's what I'm naming as pornography.
Okay, gotcha.
Do you disagree with any of those?
I don't really disagree with any of that. Like,
Yeah.
I don't understand why kids beyond
They shouldn't be on
earlier
Instagram.
than middle school would even have cell phones. But
Yeah, but the point is that, like, it's not just a matter of, like, personal opinion that I don't think that kids should be. Like, I think that as a matter of public policy, in the same way that I think as a matter of public policy that the government should intervene and stop you from being able to beat your children, I think the government should intervene and stop you from permitting your kid to be on Instagram as a small child.
fair enough. Pretty sure they got TOS behind that one too.
Wait, how so? What was that?
How so?
Oh, don't they? Do they allow kids on like Instagram and TikTok at a certain age? Or is that non-specific?
They don't on paper. I think that Facebook in particular has like a 13-year-old cutoff. I remember that from back when I was under 13. But they don't enforce it at all. They make no attempt to enforce it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, from like a policy level, if you could turn up the heat on, you know, making that the app's problem if they had, you know, if there were so many reports of underage people on their app, they get some kind of fines. Maybe you could get them to create some kind of innovation.
Yeah, I mean, fine. I mean, sure. Like, I also think that there should be, you should be able to buy cards at, like, you know, at CVS's and convenience stores or whatever, that are just evidence. You literally just flash an ID of 18 plus, and after flashing that, you get access to this card that allows you to go to certain sites. And I don't even think those sites should be exclusively pornography. I think those sites, like, I personally want to be able to have certain conversations online that I know are among adults, even if they're not sexual.
Yeah.
I just don't want kids there. In the same way that I go to a bar sometimes and just, like, talk to people in platonic ways, but I just don't feel like having there be kids around. And I think it's really damaging that we allow kids basically everywhere on the internet. That's a problem.
Any closing thoughts? I'm fading pretty fast here.
I am too. That's fair. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for 2 really great conversations, Quibbles.
Yeah, for sure. This was interesting.
Thanks for joining Void for this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess if there's anything you want to shout out again, I'll probably cut these up into 2 separate videos since they were wildly different
at
topics.
QuibblesC on YouTube, okay, and also on Twitter at QuibblesC on Twitter. What else do I have to say? I'm sorry for all of my technological issues today. That was not ideal.
I hold you 100% accountable for those.
Yeah.
Since you
I'm sorry
support
for
Israel, and I believe it was Mossad doing all of it, you know.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Cool. Have a good one.
All right. Cheers. If you guys want to chat more, feel free to. I'm gonna head out.
I'm fading too.
All right.
Have a good one.